Hi team, welcome to the penultimate day of the challenge. This has flown by so quickly for me. I don't know about you guys, but it seems to have gone so quick. But I'm really hoping that over the last couple of weeks, I've helped to give you a better understanding of strength and conditioning and how it applies to grappling. What I'm going to do in this video, guys, is take you through a crash course, a little bit of a recap of the points that we've covered, and I'll also have some time to answer some questions as well in the comments. So let's start, guys, by thinking about why we're doing strength, why we're getting in the gym, why we're training our body. We're doing this to back up our skills. Skills are always going to be the priority in any grappling sport, and any sport whatsoever. But once we've developed a good foundation of skills, we want to back these up with attributes. We've talked about these different attributes, guys. We've talked about our strength, our conditioning, our cardio, our flexibility, etc. What we need to do is we don't need to be an exceptional athlete in any one of these areas, but we cannot be lacking either. When we talked about strength, guys, we went into the gym, we looked at concise workouts under 60 minutes. We looked at making sure that when we were in the gym, the moves and the exercise that we were doing were selected to improve our grappling performance and our overall goals. We weren't just sticking to a bodybuilding template or a powerlifting template or just going in and freestyling it. We were going in with a plan, and I cannot stress to you how important that is. Highlighting the areas in the game that we were maybe weak in using the sheet that I provided, and then looking at how we can fill those gaps and how we can improve those areas. Once we're in there, guys, we're being efficient with our time. We're making sure that where possible, we can pair exercises, we can make sure that we're flowing through a logical progression through our training, and we can be in and out of there and saving plenty of time and energy for our grappling. We also address nutrition. Hopefully I've alleviated the idea that you must eat clean, that it's going to be chicken, brown rice and broccoli for every meal. We do not need to be doing that, guys. It's important that our diet is mainly focused on performance, unless we're in a period of time where we're specifically trying to lose or gain weight from the body. I provided you a cheat sheet, so refer back to that for a simple setup, guys, and that's going to be a great starting point for you in terms of your nutrition. Remember, no food is off the table, and we're sticking to that 80-20 rule, where 80% of our diet is made up of as many nutritious sources as possible, food that we could consider quote-unquote healthy, and then we're 20% made up of foods that we enjoy. These don't necessarily need to be unhealthy foods, but usually they might be foods that we don't want to eat to abundance, so our snack foods, our cheat foods as it were. What we need to understand is that these are all part of a healthy diet and all part of an approach where we can stick to this type of nutrition long term. We want to try and avoid the idea of having to crash diet before competitions and then eat massive amounts of food afterwards. Remember, guys, as long as we're sticking to a sensible framework, we're addressing things like our protein needs, we're addressing the right meal proportion sizes, then we're going to be able to have a great, varied and interesting diet. On the topic of diet and drinking and socializing, we also looked at how to integrate this into our social lives. And once again, there is no reason why we can't have an active and fun social life. We just did quite a lot of pre-planning around bigger events. This could be as simple as loading your calories. It could be as simple as pre-planning to have a larger calorie expenditure at the end of the week on a night out, on a day out, on a visit to a restaurant, etc. The whole idea was that we didn't go in blind. There was various protocols that we used, but they all come down to a calorie deficit. This would be eating less than we normally do on the average day. We did this via a few different means. It could be several days of lower calorie consumption. We even looked at two types of fasting. To remind you on those, we did a 16-8 fast where we had a proportion of a day that was fasted. We also looked at a 24-hour protein sparing fast where all we took in was protein throughout one day, possibly in the form of shakes, to offset a large amount of calories onto another day. The take-home point was, though, guys, that as a part of an overall lifestyle approach to our training and nutrition, I highly encourage a social life. I highly encourage you to enjoy what you eat and drink as much as possible. Just don't go in blind. Make sure you have a plan. Other elements that we touched on, guys, was cardio and the idea of gas tank. Obviously, we discussed the role of gas tank and how important it was when we stacked up against skills. And once again, skills started to become the most important thing. If we're very skillful, then we don't need to have the best gas tank in the world because we can back it up with our physicality and our skill set. However, we cannot overlook the role of cardio. We looked at the three types of cardio, guys. We had our aerobic base and then our lactic and alactic training. You can go back to the cardio video to give yourself a more thorough description, but ideally for grappling, we needed to have a little bit of both. The drill that I gave you with the towel, which I'm still recovering from, will give you a great idea of how we can work these energy systems. In the video, we go into a little bit more detail about how each one of those can be trained. And again, guys, they're very, very important, but they don't need to be done to death. You don't need to be an exceptional cardiovascular athlete. You don't need to be a marathon runner or anything else in order to be successful at grappling. We need to have our cardio at a decent level. We then discussed things like flexibility and mobility. Flexibility being our range of movement at a joint, and mobility being our range of movement at a joint and our ability to express strength through it. I argued that although I believe flexibility is incredibly important, especially in an area that we are particularly tight or we're not very flexible in, but mobility would be overall our most important asset. The reason for this is because if I'm flexible enough to put myself into a position, but I cannot exert any strength through that movement to get out of that position, then it starts to become less valuable to me. The way that we looked at this, guys, was through lifting weights, lifting our body weight, moving through a full range of movement with a degree of resistance. This would allow us to develop a good degree of flexibility and mobility, and it would allow us to express strength in unorthodox and difficult positions. For example, being crushed underneath somebody's body weight, being inverted, etc. When it came to flexibility, we looked at 3 different types of stretching. Dynamic stretching, which would be kind of fast moving stretching, which will be used pre-workouts in an effort to warm up our bodies and prepare them for exercise. We then looked at ballistic and static stretching, both of which could be used post-exercise to increase our flexibility over time. Those types of stretches are going to be really, really useful if you wanted to improve your flexibility. Once again, we come back to this area. We don't need to be a master in yoga. We don't need to be a contortionist or super flexible for our grappling, but we do need to have an adequate degree of flexibility in our entire body. And similarly to our strength and cardio, I would always recommend that you go into a sport-specific style of stretching. There's going to be some types of stretches that would be amazing for kickboxers that may not be amazing or may not be as useful for a grappling athlete. If you're a wrestler, the demands on your body may be different to a BJJ player or a judo player. So identify areas that you may feel that you suffer from in terms of flexibility and then address them themselves. Some of the other things that we talked about, guys, was the idea of the warm-up, the classic BJJ warm-ups, the classic class warm-ups, where they either can be incredibly boring, monotonous and kind of repetitive, and also those warm-ups where we feel like we're going to die. And hopefully I've given you maybe a smarter approach to take in terms of your own warm-ups for class and your own warm-ups in your own training. Remember, we want to go through a pulse raiser just to prepare our body for exercise, a short mobility routine, not to be confused with flexibility and mobility training, and then finally, I feel like a sport-specific movement where we actually have a lot of mental focus on what we're doing to be much more important than just sort of drilling an exercise mindlessly. When we're in the gym, that would look like a pulse raiser, then a mobility exercise, and then the start of our training where we would gradually ramp up towards our heavier or our working sets and our training. Finally, guys, we talked also about the role of strength and conditioning training in injury. Hopefully I've alleviated your worries that you would have an increased injury risk, and actually hopefully that I've convinced you that you would decrease your injury risk. We go back to that quote from Brett Contreras, where he says, if you think lifting weights is dangerous, try being weak. Being weak is dangerous. And I think that really summarizes my approach to injury prevention and making sure that we can train harder, longer, and with an overall greater longevity to our grappling. Having a strong, robust machine is much more beneficial than having a slightly weaker, slightly less efficient machine. The final thing then, guys, was our accountability and the importance of the role of a coach or some guidance in terms of our training. And I think the best way I can highlight this is to talk about my own experience and to say that that was the big turning point for me. When I sought out experts in the field, that's where I really saw improvements and a much more streamlined approach in terms of my training. And this is going to be highlighted for you guys. I'm sure you all have a grappling coach, and I just kind of always go back to thinking, how would that grappling journey look without that coach in your life? Yes, you can look at videos, yes, you can read books, and they can definitely help your knowledge, but without the guidance of your instructor, it would be a much more difficult journey to be able to move forward without all of the pieces of the puzzle. So tomorrow, guys, I'm going to be going live in the Facebook group. Just below in the comments, I'm going to leave all the details for that. But if you're serious about wanting to get bigger, stronger, more athletic, and to look good whilst doing it, then I'm going to be talking in that video about how you can further your training with the Grapple Machine program. I look forward to seeing you all there.